Good afternoon, ladies, gentlemen, and all my NB friends. You are tuned to Sacred Voices on KGNU. This is Metro Arts. My name is Aston. I will be your host for this afternoon, and I am the co-executive director for Sacred Voices. Sacred Voices is a nonprofit organization based in Denver, Colorado. We do poetry workshops for youth around the Denver metro area, and we also host an open mic on the second Friday of every month. This month, that is today, October 8th, and that will be at 6:30 p.m. You can join us live on our Facebook page, Sacred Voices Denver. If you're interested in performing, please let us know. Speaking of which, we have the featured performer of that show here with us today, Cipriano. How are you doing?
Not too bad. How about yourself?
I'm doing just fine. So, you are a bit of an interesting performer. Normally we do poetry workshops, we do poetry performances, and you certainly have a bit of that within you, but one of the things that's notable about you is that you are a musician.
Correct. Yeah, I kind of try to be ambiguous in both worlds in the sense of trying to combine and blend both poetry and music into what I'm creating, and sometimes it lends itself a bit more to a toe tapper, and other times it's more of a ballad, and sometimes it's right in between, and I guess I'm always trying to live right in between in everything that I do artistically.
It's definitely apparent in your work. When I've seen some of the stuff that you do, it's like a mixed media type of thing. There's a lot of different aspects going into everything that you do. One of the things that's pretty striking about performances I've seen of you recently is this instrument that you have. Can you tell us about it?
Yeah, of course. One of the things that really has moved me so far to play an instrument has been the two-string slide bass that was invented by the musician and poet Mark Sandman of the band Morphine and a lot of other bands that he started back in Boston. This was a 90s band, and I was watching The Ciprianos one day, and they usually have the same theme song every time it comes on, but this time this other song came on, and the first time I heard that instrument, I was like, what is that? And then I wanted to start playing bass anyway, and then I was like, maybe I'll start just with a one-string bass, because I don't know, I just like simplicity. And I looked that up, and then I saw this man's picture, and I'm like, who is this? And it's like Mark Sandman. I was like, oh, that was the band that I just listened to and saw on The Ciprianos. So this serendipitous kind of relationship just formed, and I've been fortunate enough to meet the remaining members of Morphine, and that's Dana Colley and Jerome Dupree. And we actually did a Zoom conversation about their album Cure for Pain earlier this year, which will be released hopefully sometime soon through Archive, which is another nonprofit here in Denver. So yeah, in summation, I play the two-string slide bass. I construct them myself. Me and a local luthier by the name of Scott Lofquist in Wheat Ridge helped me put them together, and we created a friendship through that, and through that friendship I have 4 different variations of that instrument.
It's very cool, and it provides a pretty distinct sound. The fact that it's a bass and kind of a lead role is already a bit striking, but the fact that you add the slide to it as well adds a whole other aspect to it. I'm curious, I understand how you came to appreciate this instrument, but why build it yourself?
Well, first motivation from that is just like anything else, money. And I was like, so I reached out to luthiers that were local, luthiers that were national, and then international. Talked to people in Japan and where else? Czech Republic. And everybody pretty much gave me the same quota to making this instrument. I'm like, well, surely it can't be that expensive. I mean, Mark Sandman found his guitar or his bass in I think it was a thrift store or a pawn shop, and bought it for $50 apparently, and then kind of just Frankenstein this monster together, and it created something that was very unique but familiar. So I was like, well, I kind of want that experience because I'm an artist, and I've done sculpture and woodworking and metalwork and all these other things. So I understood all the elements, just like the 4 elements, understood all of these, and I kind of combined them and just drove up the confidence to really just figured to make it myself, and I needed some help. And so I made the bodies, and I had all the parts, and I just needed that 30 years of expertise, which is Scott Lofquist, and made a replica of Mark Sandman's bass. It looks pretty much like his. The only difference is I'm left-handed. That's another big motivation, is it's hard to find unique, cool-looking basses when you're left-handed. That's for any instrument, really, that's a stringed kind of guitar-esque instrument. And I really loved his design, which is this like curly-Q scroll on it. And I love the concept of the spiral anyway and all that, Fibonacci sequence stuff. So it really spoke to me. And I had to have something that was almost exactly like his, because I don't know, there's something about the way it looks that I really crave to understand, and I'm always pursuing that with that instrument.
Yeah, that's very interesting. The thing that kind of strikes me about the way that you were talking about kind of the intersection between music and poetry, and it sounds like there's another intersection between like sculpture and building things, like the fact that you have an instrument that you built is just another facet of the artistic expression that you have.
Right. Yeah, and there's something different about it than just going to a store and buying it. I mean, we're going to be working on a music video and a single pretty soon next year. And not to give it away too much, but my drummer was talking about, well, why don't you just film you making a bass? And, I think there's something very intimate about literally taking the elements like a hunk of wood and just seeing that it truly is just a hunk of wood with some electronics in it and a few pickups. And you plug it in and it can make all these different sounds. And I just have really been fascinated by that. And I like guitars beforehand, but now I really, truly love them if they have that vintage kind of vibe to them. So
it's very cool. As a musician myself, that's one of the things that I've never done, is actually go in and build the instrument myself.
Right. So, yeah, it's definitely gives you a whole new perspective.
I'm sure, yeah. So one of the things that, speaking of like intersections of different artistic mediums, is that you are one of our workshop facilitators at Sacred Voices as well.
Right.
And as I understand it, you've been... it's mostly poetry that you're teaching in these workshops, but you integrate music as well into that. Can you talk a bit about your experience doing that?
Yeah, for sure. I went to Regis University and studied sociology and majored in it and graduated from there in 2014. And I really wanted to do sociology to really understand why I hated society, quite frankly. And I wanted to know and understand myself and how I fit into this world and this reality that I happen to be thrust into. And music has always been something that I loved. And it wasn't until I realized you can blend historical history, just history in general, with music. And they both go hand in hand. The 60s movement, had the psychedelics and such, and, a lot of different political movements at the time. And you can hear that frequency, I think, in that music. And my point being is I combine that whole feeling to my classes because I want to show that not only are these people alluding and communicating through instruments, they're also talking and singing. And what are they saying? And sometimes things can sound, quote unquote, more like a song, and some things can sound more like a poem. But I am very much in love with the things that combine both of those worlds. And for my students, I really just want to show them that poetry is everywhere. Poetry's in a short story, poetry's in a song, poetry's, in limericks. It's every sort of, I think it's all about delivery. And I think poetry and music just choose to sometimes go separate ways about it, but also sometimes it harmonizes. And I really am in love with that for sure.
Absolutely. So more about your experience with these young people who you're teaching. They're in a different generation than you and me. So when we were growing up, we had these artistic moments and specific people that we would see that would shape our perception of like what an artist was. And for this upcoming generation, it's totally different.
Yeah.
And I'm curious what you have noticed about them that is different than what you experienced when you were their age.
That's a really, really good loaded question, and I like that. I don't know. There's part of me that my immediate response is that I think they are more lost than we were. That's one thing. But then at the same time, my opposite response would be they're no different at all. But I do lean into the fact that they are more lost because there's so many options. And I think we're still in the stage technologically that because we have the internet, that there's so many options. And there's so much abundance of lifestyles or religions or influences or politics, and you just pick one. It's like, this vast vault of different ways and perspectives, and that's very liberating, but it's also really a dubious task when I think you're developing as a teenager. And the big word to that is the internet. And I didn't have the internet really till I was about 19 or 20, going into college. And I just saw how rapidly it developed into this whole new reality. And I think that's the biggest factor. But I still think I can reach them. And that's why I like teaching these workshops and working with youth, is because just like anyone else, I think what I like about teenagers is if they think it sucks, they'll just tune out or they'll just say it sucks. Versus adults will either be polite or patronize you. And there's a brutal, beautiful honesty about the teenage mind in the sense of it's either yes or no. And when it is yes, I feel like at least 90% of them are there. And it all just happenstances about, just different factors on how and when you feel like opening up at those moments. And when they find the words to really express what's going on in their brains, that's a beautiful thing, for sure.
Yeah, so an artist is an artist, no matter when they came up. And that's, I think that's pretty apparent in when we look back as well, because everybody gets inspired by various people, and there's no reason why you can't get inspired by something that happened 20 years ago or 100 years ago even.
And I think that's a big reason why I liked Morphine, is I thought they were a modern band, but then every time I'm like, oh, they're a modern band, I look at when they started or when this was released, it's like 92, 93, and I'm like, okay. And when I do present my music and work, people are like, it feels very vintage, or it sounds like grunge, or it's like 90s. And it's interesting because it's like, yeah, I guess it's a time period. And I have heard critiques of music. It's like, oh, that's old. I don't listen to things that are old. It's like, that's history right there. So you're listening to what people were quite literally listening to back, 20, 40 years ago. And it's like time travel. And for me, why I like Spotify and all those things, I was very anti-Spotify. But then I looked at it as like a jukebox in your pocket. You don't even need to put a dime or a quarter in there. You can access the world of music. So you just have to train those algorithms to tell you what to listen to. That's the thing, is training your algorithms to your submission. But it's great stuff.
You kind of run into the same problem. Well, you can see where the problems come from with the youth you were talking about, how there's so many options.
Right.
When you have the entire history of Western music at your fingertips, it's easy to become overwhelmed and not sure what to listen to.
Yes. And I think it really comes down to just attention. So I do a lot of streaming on this platform called Omegle. And why I like Omegle is it's like a one-to-one conversation. Typically, you're just on camera, and it's like a television show. And then you can just hit escape, and then it's a new person. And you can put in tags like, Nirvana or grunge, and you come up with these different people who also have the same tags. And whenever, a young person is on there and they stop for, 3 minutes or 5 minutes, which is generally how long my songs are. And then after those 5 minutes, they still want to inquire, like, where can I get that? Who is that? Is that your song? Wow, is that Nirvana, which is another strange one to hear. And I'm like, it's my song. And my point is our time is always so precious, especially now that it's even more and more commodified. And when somebody chooses to spend 5 minutes with me or 3 minutes and really just engage with me, it's a beautiful thing. And I think that's a good way to look at the internet, is on that level, because I just view it like a street corner. Like back in the day, you just go on the street corner and put down your hat and start playing. And people still do, and it's a beautiful way to do it. But I have to move all my gear, and I'm a big gearhead, so I like to have all this technology when I'm streaming. So I can just turn it on, and I have my own little studio just to whoever will happen to listen to my tales of woe, they seem to stay, which is a really cool thing for sure.
It seems like the act of busking is still out there, but very different at this point. And
I think you have to look at it as kind of like a digital busking, because I'm not physically moving, but I'm definitely traveling literally around the world. So you can see the different demographics of different places that, will stop and have the time. Currently, the demographic, I sound like a capitalist, but it's true. Currently, the demographic is Brazil. I'm finding a lot of people from Brazil very much enjoying my music, as well as Argentina. So maybe someday I'll go over there and live it in person.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's the kind of experience that could never have existed 40 years ago. Like some kid in their bedroom making their music. It could be huge in Indonesia, but they would never know.
Exactly.
And now you can.
Yeah, exactly. And I think, a lot of bands that I enjoy and a lot of creative people, it starts off in a closet in a bedroom, or it starts off in a bedroom or a hotel room, this cheap place that you've kind of been forced to because of capitalism. And then you find the beauty in the monster, I think. And a lot of the most beautiful things have been created with not very much funds, if you know what I mean, if we're talking, I guess, going into that direction.
Absolutely. So I wanted to give you an opportunity to talk about some of the stuff you've got going on. So I know you have 4 performances for Redline. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think it's through their Checking In series, and they're really focusing on involving more performing artists. And I, do performing arts as well, too, as, with movement and music, and try to create something that's, in its unique way, just something that's eluding creativity. And Redline has been gracious enough to hire me to do 4 weekends, 4 days, 2 weekends of a performance, which is called Mr. Mundane. And it's a musical project that me and my drummer, Vitaly Minielo, worked on during the pandemic. And even before the pandemic, probably about December of 2019, it was a strange time, even before, the pandemic hit, and a lot of music came out of that time period. But it's very different from my current work. But it's nice to have this alter ego, and it's going to be fun to see that character come out, because I think people are more accustomed to this laid-back 2-string slide blues player. But Mr. Mundane is very different, and that's all I'll say about that.
Yeah, so the way that you've characterized your performances in music is they seem to be based in, they're character-based.
That's a very good way to put it. Yeah.
Could you describe a bit more of that and the specific characters that you've got?
Yeah, I mean, the blues has always been a big influence for me, and particularly slide guitar comes from the blues. Even the diddly bow itself, which is a 1-stringed instrument, you put a glass bottle to a guitar string, and you can make some beautiful stuff. And that's why I think I really like 2-stringed and 1-stringed instruments, because it's out of that poverty and desperation, you can still make music. And so these characters kind of elude. And I was looking back to the beat poets of the 1950s and 60s, and I was looking at their fashion. I didn't realize this until very recently, that I like, film noir. It's influenced me musically, artistically, overall. And I just look at how they're dressed. You can just notice the fedoras or the little vintage suits and stuff. And I discovered that I really like that vintage feel. And so the reason why I dress the way I do now is it is a character. But even before that, I was a character anyway in society, and picking these costumes to wear. And, all clothes are costumes. And, I just kind of was always squeezed into certain things. And it was not until recently that I was like, I can wear this costume all the time. So, yeah, Mr. Mundane, oddly enough, wears a suit as well, too. But his suit, I designed it to do something different than most suits. And again, I'm trying to leave suspense for people to check out Mr. Mundane through Redline, because it's going to be very different. And I think those people who know my work will be, hopefully, pleasantly surprised.
Of course. And if you have just joined us recently, you're listening to Sacred Voices on Metro Arts on KGNU. My name is Aston, and I have Cipriano with us here, and we're just talking about some of the projects that he has been working on recently. And so you touched on this a little bit, kind of the outward appearance and characterization that you have. And speaking of Columbus Day and all this stuff, I know that you wanted to put forth your indigenous identity. Can you talk a little bit about the way in which you do that and what you're trying to accomplish?
Yeah, I think a good example maybe would be my fedora hat. And I've seen historical pictures of indigenous people when, the Western fashion was more trending. I've seen indigenous peoples wearing their traditional garbs, but then all of a sudden, the top of their head, they have this, this hat. Whether it's this kind of hat, or it's just, a Western hat, like a bowler hat. I've seen that as well too. It's very common that, had the hat trade, the fur trade, and, making hats back in the day was a big thing. You always had to have a hat. So I saw that image, and it really struck me. So I think that's a big reason why I wear the hat. And in terms of just wearing, nice clothing and suits, I always find it interesting when people are, when I wear a suit that's like, you look really nice. And then when I'm not, I'm treated in a very different way. And I think appearance is something that I'm always, experimenting with, because all the performing artists and musicians and just movers and shakers of the world, we're always questioning, like, why if I do this one thing, I'll be treated this way, but if I do something else, I'll be treated this way. And of course, it's a lot deeper than that and more, that's a very simplified thing, but it really comes down to embracing my indigenous heritage and just trying to make a hybrid of what is left of relating to that world that I don't really know, which is the indigenous world pre-colonialism, which is a world I'd like to see someday. I feel this calling to the earth, and I like being barefoot, and I like just going outside and just seeing nature and watching the ants and just seeing it all just move. And then there's a part of me that's like, I have to go to work. I have to make money. I have to buy things. I have to consume things, and I have to make things to be consumed. And that juxtaposition, I feel, is just capitalism and colonialism. And it's not even about race. It's about what we put up to believe into to make a daily routine. And there's nothing wrong with earning a fair wage to get by, but obviously we have, the top 1%, and it gets dangerous in that way. So living in those two worlds, I have to really find a way to find a balance. And I think, through my appearance and just my art practices is my therapeutic way of dealing with that.
Yeah, art is a very it's a cathartic way to express yourself and kind of relieve yourself of the tensions of, capitalist requirements of life
right
in this day and age.
Yeah, and that's another thing I've really been dealing with, is this whole concept of art is liberation, but liberation is freedom, at least to an American, and then freedom, is the American dream, and the American dream is getting a job and getting rich. But that's been gone since the 70s. And I think the more we do research as a country, I think the more we will realize that maybe we need to question our ideas of what the word freedom really means. And if you're really up to the task, because freedom and liberation are beautiful things, but when you're kind of boiled down to McDonald's or Burger King, that's kind of a dichotomy that's kind of redundant, if that makes sense.
Yeah, definitely an illusion of choice there.
Exactly, yeah.
So I wanted to switch gears a little bit and talk a bit about the last 18 months that you've had. Everybody has had a bit of a shared struggle with COVID. And I always like to ask artists how it's affected them, because I feel like the arts was pretty uniquely affected in that concerts were gone. Every gathering of people that is what the basis of arts and community is was gone. How did you adapt to that?
The word apocalypse really keeps coming to my mind to that question, or the response to that. And I think, 2020, as odd as it may sound, I think it was, in a way, an end of a world that we were very familiar with. And COVID put us in our place to really question our mortality, and allowed us to examine health, examine public health, examine society as a whole, as how do we deal with cleanliness above all things. And then after that, I think it really showed me how people respond to isolation and loneliness. And for me, I've always been a loner, and I've always been an outsider, and I had 5 years of health issues where I couldn't really function very well. And I was basically a prisoner in my own body, not even to be dramatic. So I knew what that isolation meant. I knew what being alone felt like, especially in my own body. Disassociating myself from my own body because I was in so much physical pain. Reaching that threshold really puts your mortality to perspective. And for me, COVID, I think it showed everybody else what COVID showed me. And my own health issues before that, it showed me that people will respond to being alone in very different ways, and I think we still are. And we're very afraid to shut down or lock down again, because being alone with ourselves is a very challenging thing.
Absolutely. And artists typically have kind of two different senses of this. Either it completely, it just brought their work down to zero, like they couldn't function, or they were able to gain some sense of clarity in what they were doing. And it sounded like it gave you a bit of clarity. You were able to do what you wanted to do, and you found some degree of success.
Right. Yeah, and the whole notion, I think another term I've heard a lot lately is rock bottom. And I was already pretty much there before COVID hit, so it was a place I was very familiar with, but it was weird to see. Like, I visualized it like I'm in a hole, this really deep chasm, and then people are dropping down next to me, and they're like, how do you deal with it down here? And it's like, it's not so bad. Just make some art and write some poetry, and you'll do just fine.
Yeah, and so I hesitate to say that we're coming out of it now, because the statistics don't show that, but the way that everybody lives, we are coming out of it right
adapting.
now.
I think we're adapting.
Yeah. How have things been for you during this shift of coming back to like live shows and doing all of that? How is it different?
Yeah, so the first live gig I ever had happened in March of 2020, because I had those 5 years of health issues, and I really didn't feel confident enough until March of 2020 to do a performance, which was over at the Mercury. And we'll have a filmed version of that pretty soon here. And little did I know that was kind of a historical time. Like, it was literally the weekend when Denver shut down. So I was anticipating like 30 people, and it was going to be this big party. And then all of a sudden, this mysterious thing comes in, and people are like, well, we don't know if we should go outside. I'm just going to stay here. And so it was an audience of 5. But those 5 individuals witnessed that performance, and that performance was almost a prelude to everything to come.
And that's crazy that it was like your first performance was right the weekend when everything shut down.
Right.
Now that's gives you kind of a unique perspective in how your artistic growth happens during that period.
Yeah, and for me too, it's like now that I know what it's like to not even be able to speak for 5 years, quite literally losing my voice, quite frankly, and then luckily regaining it back slowly every day, really makes you very conscious about what you're saying. And, it's not a matter of being careful of choosing your words wisely. And maybe it's a little bit of that, but it's also just speaking from your heart and really speaking your own truth. And a lot of those things sound like Hallmark card responses, but a couple of them, I think, ring true. I think capitalism has just made their phrases kind of redundant. Like have a nice day. You see have a nice day on a plastic bag in the wind, and that used to mean something. But, yeah.
That's a very good point. It gives us something all to think about. And if you, listening out there, have been interested in what Cipriano has been saying for the past half hour, good news. He is going to be performing at Sacred Voices open mic tonight. That's going to be at 6:30 p.m. If you are interested in attending in person, please message the Sacred Voices page. That's Sacred Voices Denver on Facebook and Instagram, or you can watch online virtually on our Facebook page. Cipriano, I want to give you an opportunity here to real quick plug the next few things you've got on. Where can people find you? What have you got going on next?
Yeah, the biggest platform we're really utilizing right now is Instagram, as hip as that sounds. And you can find us on there. All our music examples are on there. You can also find us on YouTube. So you can find the music that we've done so far, solo performances as well as band performances and music videos on both Instagram and YouTube. Yeah.
And how would you spell the handles for that?
That's Cipriano Band. That's Cipriano Band. And then Cipriano Ortega on YouTube. Yeah.
Great. Well, thank you very much for coming by. I will enjoy seeing your performance later tonight.
Yeah, of course. I'm looking forward to it.
All right. Well, thank you all for listening to us this afternoon. I hope you all have a great day. See you next time.